Hi everyone, welcome back to another video. Today we have a painting that I did and you'll be able to watch from start to finish. And I'm just gonna kind of chat about it, go over some of my thoughts and feelings about this painting, mostly the process. Because in this painting, I'm using only a palette knife. Recently, I've been really trying a lot of new things and learning a lot on my art journey. One of the things that I've been trying is getting better at using a palette knife. It all started because I wanted to get better at color mixing using a palette knife instead of a paintbrush, which I still do use a paintbrush to mix my colors. That hasn't changed at all. For some reason, I just like mixing it with my paintbrush. It feels weird to have to switch back and forth between a paintbrush and a palette knife. The process is just kind of disjointed to me and I don't really enjoy doing that. But in the process of trying to learn how to use a palette knife to mix colors with, I also learned how to paint with a palette knife. And that is something that I am really connecting with. And it's all because I set some rules for myself, which was that I was going to paint an entire painting using only a palette knife, which was really hard to do, especially when it comes to doing the background or the underpainting. It's actually a little unnecessary to use a palette knife to do the background because you're just gonna paint over top of it. But I knew that if I didn't set certain rules for myself that I might end up not using the palette knife at all or just not being able to get into a rhythm. I have a few other videos where I use only a palette knife to do paintings in my sketchbook, but this is the first time I've actually attempted to do a full canvas painting. I was going to wait and practice a little bit more before I did a canvas painting with a palette knife, but whenever I got the idea to do a carousel, I couldn't get it out of my head that it would look really cool with all the textures that a palette knife brings to a painting. I will say it's definitely harder to paint on canvas than I thought it would be, at least in the beginning. It's just really hard to get the paint to spread around because the canvas surface is so rough. And I'm sure I should have probably gessoed it and sanded it down before I started, but sometimes whenever you're just itching to paint, there's just no time for gesso. When you gesso a canvas, you have to wait for it to dry, and usually that takes 24 hours. And so if you don't have things pre-gessoed and waiting, a lot of times, that spark of I need to paint now makes you choose an ungessoed canvas. So you gotta do what you gotta do sometimes. So that was one thing that I struggled with, getting the paint on the canvas to start with. I'm also using acrylic paint, which as it dries, it kind of sticks to the canvas and it usually dries pretty fast. I'm using golden open acrylics, which is a slow drying acrylic. So I don't have quite as hard a time with the paint drying too fast. But there definitely is a window where spreading the paint around becomes a little bit more difficult the longer it stays on the canvas, especially in the first layers, because if you haven't gessoed your canvas, it's very thirsty. So it will suck up the paint and just really dry it that much faster. Once that base layer was done, it was a lot easier to use the palette knife, and I definitely would prefer using it on canvas over my sketchbook because the canvas is flat and a sketchbook is not so flat. Also, being able to have all this room to move was a lot easier than in a sketchbook where you're confined to this small space. I'll definitely be doing more palette knife paintings in the future. I enjoy it so much. I really feel like it's more in line with how I want to paint for the long run. Like I said in the beginning of this video, I've been trying out a lot of new things and trying to figure out, how I want to paint, my style of painting, I guess. And I feel like the marks that a palette knife makes, that kind of loose, abstract kind of textures and the way that it kind of mixes on the canvas, it's not perfect, it's very imperfect, and that's kind of where I want to be, I think. Something that I've been trying to pay attention to is what kind of paintings I like looking at, what kind of artists I'm drawn to. And what I've started to realize is that I really like that more loose look. I like being able to see the layers and imperfect brush strokes, that it looks like it was just messily put on there, but it ends up being really perfect looking at the same time. It's like a perfect mess. I don't know. I always have parts of my paintings that I really like, where I love all of my paintings that I've done so far. There's something in each piece that really sticks out to me and makes me like that painting more. And most of the time, it's some kind of mistake or imperfect mark that I really end up liking and have to stop myself from fixing or correcting. And you're literally about to see one of those marks happen. While I'm painting this horse's face, I mess up the eye and I put a little too much white over top of it. So when I'm going back and I'm trying to kind of fix it, the white that had crossed over kind of gets mixed in with the purple on my knife. I do this perfect mark right there, and that eye stays that way through the end because I really liked how it looked, even though the eye is not perfect. And I kind of wanted to add like a shine on the eye, like a dot of white or something, but I really just love how it looks as is, so I just left it.